Assalamualaikum and good morning. Greetings. I wish you joy and happiness wherever you are. Whether you are at your office, your home, your car, your bedroom, perhaps. Whether you are in Malaysia or outside Malaysia, Australia, Japan, India, Bangladesh. Welcome to UTM CEE Webinar Series. This is Webinar Series number 4. The title of this webinar is Preparing Open Book Examination for Engineering Course. This webinar is brought to you by UTM Center for Engineering Education, UTM CEE, as well as Society for Engineering Education Malaysia, SIM. Okay, my name is Zaki Yamani bin Zakaria, and I am a lecturer from the School of Chemical and Energy Engineering. I am also a fellow researcher for the Center for Engineering Education, UTM. Okay, this is a very important session. This is streamed live from UTM CE YouTube channel. So if you have not subscribed to UTM channel of CE, please do so. Also, please kindly share this. Who knows, maybe there are your friends who perhaps have not or unaware of this program. So spread some love, okay? Well, we have two very amazing speakers today. The first is Professor Dr. Khairia Muhammad Yusof, and the second is IR Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah. Okay, Professor Dr. Khairia Muhammad Yusof, okay, is actually the founder and also the director for Center for Engineering Education Malaysia. Okay, she is also the director, she is also the president for Society for Engineering Education Malaysia. Okay, while IR Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah is actually the director for EAD and EATD, Board of Engineers Malaysia. All right, Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah was a professor from the Civil and Infrastructure Engineering, Faculty of Civil Engineering, University Technology Mara. Okay, both of them together will have nearly 70 years worth of engineering and academic experiences. Okay, and that is why you need to pay special focus and attention for this webinar. Okay, also please ensure that you ask questions. Okay, you can do that at the private comment, not private comment, but the comment area at the YouTube channel. Okay, at the same time, please don't forget to register your attendance. Okay, there will be a registration link there. Okay, and you can fill up your attendance wherever you are, regardless of you are in UTM or outside UTM, in Malaysia or outside Malaysia. Okay, there will be an e-certificate prepared for you a few hours after the webinar ends. Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite IR Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah. Okay, welcome IR Dr. Siti Hawa. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, fine, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, spectacular, marvelous. We can hear you.
All right.
Luckily,
great.
you are here.
Thank you.
We are very fortunate to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, also we have here Professor Dr. Khairia as well. And for the audience information, you see, both of them have actually worked together before. But then I will let them describe their cooperation and all their works. Okay, so without further ado, I would present the session to Dr. Siti Hawa.
All right, thank you very much. I think.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Siti.
Yeah, Waalaikumsalam for Khairia.
Really nice to see you again.
Now, yeah, after quite some time, yeah.
Yes, we've actually worked together when we did the project in Afghanistan, where CEE got the funding from the World Bank on modernizing higher education in Afghanistan, where we held some workshops on OBE, student-centered learning. Do you still remember that?
That was way back in 2016, I think. Was it?
Yes. And because of the lack of proper facilities, we had our workshop in a wedding hall.
Exactly.
So we had wedding food.
Betul.
Yes, that was really very interesting.
Yeah.
And we went there twice actually, and I think both of us were enamored by the flowers and the roses that we saw there.
It was definitely nice to be by the valley and to be surrounded by the Hindu Kush mountain, and to see, you know, before flying down, reaching Kabul airport, we'll go across the snow-capped mountain. So it was beautiful. Most of the time that we went there was about springtime, spring almost going into summer. And it was really a marvelous experience for me, and I think for all of us. And for me to have one of the participants at the age of about 70 sitting in the front row, listening diligently from morning until 5 p.m. in the afternoon. That was really a big experience that no one would really be overwhelmed with, because, you know, such a marvelous situation that you have there, and the experience that we underwent there, trying to, you know, share our knowledge on outcome-based education with them. And it is good that to see that the country is now progressing in terms of their education. And I believe we do bring in, I think, almost like more than 50 students into the country, right? To
Yes,
both
yes,
UITM and
graduate
UTM.
students.
Yeah. So that's the good things that we could actually, you know, bring about with other fellow Muslim country, inshallah. Alhamdulillah.
Yes, inshallah. Okay, so I think we will hand this over to you. We have a lot of people wanting to hear
Okay.
from you as a you know, an authority in this area.
Okay. Yeah, again, thank you very much, Prokaria, Dr. Zaki, and I think to all the audience out there, we will first start with the guiding principle that we already have, and I think Dr. Yana will be able to share with the audience on the guiding principle. Okay, now, I may have a big problem here because I'm actually streaming using my phone. So excuse me if I could not read some of the words there. Most importantly, I would like to bring your attention to 2.1, I think. Can you just bring it up to 2.1? Okay. 2.1 is looking at the all programs are to ensure that all the outcome attainment is visible, and there is no way that we at the accreditation department compromise in terms of the standards. So now if you go through the guiding principle, if you go scrolled up, and we'll go looking at the TLA, the teaching, learning and assessment. 3.1 is looking at the final year project. I think Dr. Yana, you're a bit too fast. Okay. 3.1 is looking at the final year project, and it gives you some indication on how we can proceed with our final year project. And you do mention that if it needs to deal with laboratory work, we could actually now stop at a simulation during this COVID pandemic. And if you go down further, the next item would be on the industrial training. This is also an issue with respect to the engineering program, because especially those who are involved in the technology and the technician program. And next after that is the cost, let me get it. What is that? It's the laboratory. Those with laboratory may have to postpone their laboratory to probably at the time when now it seems that most of the universities are now going to reopen their doors. So this is the time for some of the students need to repeat some of the laboratory work if they have actually done it prior to this in simulation. Next to that would be the integrated design project or the design project for the engineering program. And last but not least will be the final examination. So this is our main component that we're going to discuss today. And in this particular section, it do mention about integrity. So how does the university would like to look upon on how to deal with integrity, because students are doing this remotely, they are by themselves. How do you really entail students are not going to cheat in their final exam? Because most of the time, at most of the final examination duration, it will be done face to face, meaning there is exam being done in a hall or in a classroom with a proper invigilation process taking place. And definitely it is being confined to a certain time period. Now, what is the best time period that you can take to be given as a final exam, and it is to be considered as an alternative assessment, and again to ensure that all of the learning outcome that you have already intend to obtain or to attain to at the end of the course will still be eligible for the program outcome attainment measurement. Okay, so this is basically what we have already written and we have actually circulated in our COVID-19 pandemic guideline. We call it as the guiding principle for the teaching and learning and assessment for all the engineering program under the jurisdiction of Engineering Accreditation Department and Engineering Technology Accreditation Department. So basically we do discuss a bit about the final examination, and with this principle, with this guiding principle, we are basically giving the flexibility to the universities. We are giving the flexibility to the programs to handle on how the assessment should be done. And definitely we will go back to the constructive alignment. And most importantly, all of the changes that is made during this COVID-19 pandemic is given basically the green light by the Senate and by the top management of the university. So therefore, it must be done in a due process, which we will park it under the internal quality management system. So I think from this introduction, can we move on to my slides, please? So while waiting for the slides to be on, there will be only about 15 slides. Okay, so the title will be on open book examination, and we are trying to focus on how can open book examination be taken as part of the final exam. I think way back in the 70s, that's how old I am. Attending to open book examination was actually not an easy task. As a student then to go through with open book examination is something that is really quite fearful, because you know that there are too many books that you want to bring in, but at the end of the day, do you really have the time to open all the books? So therefore, that is on the student part. But on the lecturer's part, this is what we're trying to address. You are the lecturer, we are the academicians, we are the one who's going to provide this open book examination. Now, in preparing the assessment, how can I actually ensure that my open book examination is not straightforward? Or should it be straightforward? Or should it be difficult? Or how difficult should it be? All of these questions will normally be, running in your mind. How can I really, quote unquote, help my student to pass through their final exam by having an open book examination, just because I need to have an assessment that will be able to measure all the learning outcome. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, now, assessment provide adequate feedback to the program to identify the strength and the weakness. And why do we need to identify the strength and the weakness? None other for CQI. Why do we need CQI? Because we are under outcome-based education. Outcome-based education will require us to find out what are the best ways to move and improve our learning and teaching and learning. And how do we improve our teaching and learning? Definitely through the feedback that we get through our assessment. How does our students are capable in trying to absorb all the knowledge that we have tried to share with them, that we have tried to facilitate with them? So therefore, the assessment will be able to show the strength and the weakness of the program or the learning exercises that we've done in the class. Now, we are going from face-to-face to alternative assessment. So previously, we would have the exam, the laboratory, the PBL, and then the presentation. Now we are moving to take home. And now laboratory is now done by simulation because we can't go to the lab. And PBL is being done in a way that students have to discuss with respect to teamwork by going on Google Meet, or by going on Zoom, or maybe by going on some other platform that is available on the market. But then again, do they really fulfill the intended purpose of the PBL? And how much can you really attain all those effective domain through PBL if it is done online? Definitely there would be issues such as the social interaction can't be seen through the video conferencing. Yes, you can get some of the message across, but when it comes to them working in a team, working in a group, you could see the body language and the other social impact that is actually, being developed through that particular activity. But in this manner, it is very limited now. Now the presentation now, for instance, like now, I am just presenting to just the infrastructure now through the phone, and I don't see the audience. I could not see the eyes of the audience. Are they really into it, or are they really now just playing with their phone, or they're now really just looking into some other things? Because I wouldn't be able to see the environment of how my audience is receiving to this particular lecture or to this particular knowledge sharing. So it's very much different, and it could not be that bad in my case because I have been doing a presentation to my students all the 30 over years. But when it comes to the student themselves who are trying to present, that could be, their 10th time, or maybe just the 20th time presenting to an audience of just a class of 30 people, and those skills need to be developed. And if they are just presenting to just their phone, it's just like doing just a normal video taking that they are doing with whatever, maybe what they do on the social media. It is not the same when you are working with an environment where you're presenting something that is of a high knowledge to an audience of learned people. And you will be at the back of your mind, always think that what are they going to ask me after this. So therefore, this kind of social impact, this emotional development, it is not there if you're doing presentation via voice video conferencing. Okay, unless you can really have everybody interactive through it, maybe in whatever platform. So maybe in a, even if it's going to be on Google Meet or on Zoom presentation. But then again, you cannot be having everybody to talk at the same time, because you just have to listen to one audience speaking at one time. But when you work in a presentation or in a PBL work, you will see that there will be a lot of communication, small communication happening between you and your colleague who's sitting next to you. And these really develop their communication skill. Okay, can we move to the next one? Okay, in this particular slide, I was just highlighting the two important outcomes. Basically, I will definitely try to bring all the attention back to our WP, which is complex engineering problem, and also the complex engineering activities. So basically, how are we going to make sure the assessment that we're going to design will fulfill these two criteria? Okay, next, Dr. Yana. Okay, the very familiar slide to all, I think, constructive alignment. Now, constructive alignment, I think over and over again, we are talking about student as the one in the center. And how do we close the loop between the learning outcome, the instruction, and also the assessment? And most importantly, you will see that you will also have to look at how do we deal with our WP and EA. You will see that WP and EA is being listed right hand top corner. WP is a complex problem, and EA is the complex engineering activities. This is meant for the engineering program. If you have the technology program, then it will be the broadly defined engineering problem, and also the broadly defined engineering activities, which is given an acronym of SP and TA. And for the technician, it will be DP, which is the widely defined engineering problem, and the NA for the widely defined engineering activities. Now, our focus will be WP and EA, and definitely you're looking at the complexity, and later we will discuss on the characteristic of WP and also the characteristics of EA. Okay, next. I think I have to speed up. It's almost 20 minutes now. Okay, basically these are the 12 learning outcomes, 12 program outcomes for all the programs that we have. And those in olive green are those program outcomes that will have to discuss complex engineering problem. PO1, PO2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And in each of those boxes, you will see the WKs. What are WKs? They are knowledge profiles. So the knowledge profile WK 1, 2, 3, 4 will be meant for engineering knowledge and problem analysis. WK5, which is on design, will be under WA3. Investigation will look at research literature, WK8. And then modern tool usage will look at the practice of knowledge. And engineer in society will look at comprehension. Environment and sustainability will look at comprehension, that is WK7. And also in ethics, you will be looking at WK7. And can you look at the pink color box that is on communication, and you will be addressing the complex engineering activities. The others under lifelong learning, project management and finance, and individual and teamwork are free. Okay, now, under the recent IEA 2020 meeting, IEAM 2020 meeting just recently ended, I think between the 21st of June to the 26th of June. Now, currently you see that we are having WK1 right up to WK8. Now, there will be an introduction of WK9. WK9 is now being discussed, and when it is approved, and it is scheduled to be approved in IEAM 2021. So therefore, definitely the department will have to look at the new category of knowledge profile. But until 2021, we are going to use these program outcomes and the knowledge profile based on the 2013 resolution of IEA in terms of the graduate attributes and also the professional competency. Okay, next. All right, these are basically the details of all the the knowledge profile, which is identified as WKs. And then we have the characteristics of WP. We have WP1 right up to WP7. And then we also have the complex engineering activities of EA1 right up to EA5. I do not want to go in detail on that. You can easily read them, and we will refer to it later when we deal with the exercise on the how to design our open book examination. Can we go next, Dr. Yana? All right. This is another slide that we definitely would use when we are designing our complex engineering problem. We will normally try to deal with PO1 right up to PO5 in terms of analysis of problems and also the synthesis of solutions. So whenever that we have PO1 right up to PO5, we will try to go more on analysis and synthesis of solutions. So this can also be the basis as how you want to develop your open book examination. So it will go back to what is the program outcome that you are assigned to with respect to the courses that you are teaching, and you can always go back to the main style of asking question. And if it's under PO1 right up to PO5, it's best to go on the analysis of problems and the synthesis of solutions. Between PO6, 7, and 8, we'll go on responsibilities and what is required in the workplace. PO9, PO10, PO11, and PO12 may not be able to gauge under the open book examination. It is normally easiest to go under the PBL, right? Okay, let us go next. Okay, the alternative assessment, I'm going to just give two examples, which is on open book and simulation. How do you really ensure quality assurance is built into it? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'm giving this particular slide again because I will be using it back and forth with the upcoming slide. Can we show the upcoming slide? Okay, this is the slide that I will spend a bit time here. Okay, I'm looking more at the POs. So you will have to identify your courses POs. If I am dealing with PO number 5, right? PO number 5, I am dealing with design courses. So therefore, I am going to assign open book exam to this particular course. So I must always remember that under the design course, okay, under the design course, which is under, okay, sorry, I am looking at PO5. PO5 is modern tools. I'm very sorry because this is very small for me. I'm using my phone. Now, under PO5, we have modern tools, right? When you're looking at modern tools, if you look at the WK, which is assigned to modern tools, it is WK6. And what is WK6? WK6 is on engineering practice. So PO5, you look at PO5, PO5 is on modern tool usage. And modern tool usage is assigned with WK6. And WK6 is actually on practice. So when you look at practice, and if you go across the table, you will see that I've already assigned WP4 and WP5. So what is WP4 and what is WP5? Can you just bring back to the previous slide, Dr. Yana? WP4 is familiarity of issues. Okay, familiarity of issues which involve infrequently encountered issues. And I also assign WP5, which is extent of applicable codes. When you talk about extent of applicable codes, it is outside problems encompassed by standards and codes of practice for professional engineering. If I give you an example of a civil engineering, all right? So in the normal classroom environment, I will only be teaching probably to come out with RC retaining wall, reinforced concrete retaining wall. But I can actually go with some other method which is available in the market, but it is not in our standard, but you can find it in the manufacturer's guideline. So therefore, if you are using the manufacturer's guideline, these can qualify under WP5, which is extent of applicable codes that you're using beyond than what you're actually teaching in the class. Similarly, you may be using some other materials, for instance, steel fiber material, and you want to reduce the reinforcement, but you are using the steel fiber concrete. So therefore, by using such a combination, you are not using the normal standard that you are using in your professional practice. You are also using the manufacturer details that have been given as their guideline in the process of the construction. And what more if you're looking at the IBS, JKR may come up with their own standard, which is practically not in the standard that you actually been using in the classroom, because they can be beyond than the normal classroom environment. So WP5 is applicable for this particular exercise. Now, if I look at WP4, which is involved in frequently encountered issues, meaning that in the classroom, we will normally go by the syllabus, and probably in a particular syllabus, you will have a section by saying that advanced technology or advanced construction method or advanced material. So anything advanced is according to the current situation. So these issues and these kind of experiences may not be familiar to all unless a particular student will be involved in such and such advanced environment during their industrial training. If they don't go through that process, they will not be able to get themselves familiar with such and such advanced technology. Even some of the new equipment that is actually in the market. For instance, not many of them are involved with TBM. the tunnel boring machine. So not many of them are actually involved in a railroad industry. So there are many machines that is actually there in the construction industry, which our students are not familiar. If you are going to have this kind of examination that would include this kind of experiences, these are going to provide students with all the WP characteristic. If you can go back to the next slide, Dr. Yana. Okay, so that is a discussion on the modern tool usage, which is on PO5. And modern tool usage can also include all the other simulation software that you have in your program, or probably with whatever program that is of a student version that the student can use. These can also be used as part and parcel of how the student can solve their open book examination. So if you look at PO number 3, what is PO number 3? PO number 3 is on design. And what do I have? A compulsory WK is WK5, which is actually on design. So when we are looking at our POs, the most importantly is we have to relook at what are the compulsory WK that we must address. So once we have actually addressed those, then we can also look at what is the characteristics of WP. And if you look back in the previous slide, it do mention that for complex problem solving to be considered as being addressed, you must have the characteristic of WP1. So WP1 meaning that you are looking at the knowledge profile from WK3, WK4, WK5, WK6, and WK8. And some or all. When you talk about and, some or all, some I would take minimum of 2. So I am addressing WP1. So WP1, at which WK am I addressing WP1? So in my example of PO3 recently, I am using WK5. So WK5 qualified to be one of the WK that must be addressed in WP1. Now, what about the sum or all of the remaining WP? So if you look at the next page again, Dr. Yana, so I am addressing my PO3 with WK5, which is the eligibility for WP1 and some or all. So in here, I am using WP2 and WP5. So what is WP2? WP2 here is talking about range of conflicting requirement. So if I am doing design and I'm using WP2, it is good because it will qualify for design because it's a range of conflicting requirement. So in designing my open book examination, I can actually assign students with different type of parameters. So by doing so, I can eliminate a bit on the copying side because we are doing this remotely, right? So I can eliminate some of the integrity problems. So we can address this problem by giving some kind of variation or some kind of variables to whatever, maybe to the depth or to the size, to maybe even the geometry, even some addition of certain element to the design that you want them to pursue. So therefore, I'm giving WP as one of the complex engineering problem characteristic, and the other is WP5, which is again on the extent of applicable codes. Why do I use extent of applicable codes? Because this is dealing with PO3, which is on design. Okay, I think that should be able to give you a brief idea of what is the take-home exam going to be. And the next one is on simulation, I think. Can you just move on to the next slide? Yeah, the slide before this. The slide before this. The slide on simulation. Now, yeah, that's one. Computer simulation. So when you talk about computer simulation, I've actually practically addressed the PO5 earlier on. So PO5, I can go on a simulation, and all of those computer simulation work can be using PO5, and you can also have I can also park in WK4 there. What is WK4? WK4 is actually on specialist knowledge, right? And it will have WK4 specialist knowledge, and I have WK6, which is the practice knowledge, and I will be addressing WP4, and I will also address WP5. If I want to make it of a higher degree of complexity, I can add in another WP. But I think at the level of our undergraduate studies, it is enough to just deal with only at maximum of 3 WPs at any question, because we definitely have to have WP1. Then after that, you can just pick any 2 of the other WPs according to the PO that you are addressing. All right. Okay. So next slide. So that is on the simulation. Okay. Next slide, Dr. Yana. All right. I am actually putting this back. So trying to recall our PO1 right up to PO7 is addressing the complex engineering problem. And later we have the PO10, which is addressing the complex engineering activities. So you will see that all the WKs are being addressed in all of those PO1 to PO8. And under complex engineering activities will just be the characteristic of the activities. So can we go next? I think that should be the end of the presentation. And we should now at the level of the acculturation of the outcome-based education system, because we started way back in 2000, the early 2000, and we already have like more than 2 cycles of our graduates out there in the market, and therefore they should be actually putting up the outcome-based education practice in their life, in their daily life. And I think that should be my presentation for now. And I will open to question if you have 1 or 2, and then later we can keep the questions to the end of the presentation after Prof. Karia's presentation. Back to you, Dr. Zaki. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Siti. It's a very informative, deep impact explanation. So I believe a lot of people there, outside there, is quite overwhelmed, and because you have mentioned a lot of things there. Okay, but then let's see if there's any question. Okay, I have a question. Okay, if I can read it first. Let me see. Okay, you have prepared this, I mean, BEM have prepared this COVID-19 pandemic guideline under the EAC department. And I believe you have taken a special role in preparing this documentation, all right? Is there any specific training or any special custom-made course to be prepared for engineering educators throughout Malaysia for this, perhaps prepared by BEM?
Okay, what we have done basically when we come out with this guiding principle was basically we receive numerous queries from the industry. I mean, industry means the universities, on how can we go about by taking online classes. Is online classes permissible? Is online classes really legit for the assessment of outcome-based education? How is it going to affect our accreditation exercise? So we form an immediate task group to discuss about coming up with this guideline. And we look at some of the other examples that we can throughout the world. And definitely at that point of time, there were not many. And we were among the very few that actually had come up with that particular guideline. And upon going through the particular setting up of the guideline with our council members, I do engage with our panel, and as when I was on board, I form up the WhatsApp group for our panel. We have two groups, the ETAC group and also the EAC group. So there were a lot of questions that is being posed on that particular group. So we get feedback from this particular group because since that was the early part of the MCO and we could not move anywhere, so that's the only medium that is easy to get the feedback from our stakeholders. So when we do this sharing session with our panels, because our panels are the eyes and the ears of the department, so they are the one who actually basically give some ideas on how to proceed. So from there, we consolidate and come out with the guiding principle. And the most important thing, the most important basis that we took is we expect that the universities are mature. And that is why we go with the acculturation of OBE, because we have been here since the early of 2000. So this is already almost more than a decade. So what is actually the impact of OBE? And it should be actually down in the culture now. It should be in the society now, because our graduates are already out there in the society. So therefore, we do not want to prescribe. Yeah, we do not want to prescribe to the universities that you must be doing A, B, C, D. So we make, if you read through our guiding principle, everything is very open-ended. We want the university to give us a guideline on how you can actually proceed, and based on whatever learning, sharing of TLA that we've done with other universities as well, they should be able to come out with the best that they can deal with their own university. And we at the EAD and ETAC, we are very open-minded about receiving all these new norms of TLA. But most importantly, as I already mentioned earlier on, we do not want to compromise the standard of our accreditation process.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Sure.
But then, since you have mentioned you are actually relying or depending on the maturity of the OBE experience from the universities in Malaysia, correct?
Yes.
So, how about enforcement? Not to say enforcement, but then monitoring. How do you, the EAD department in BM, which is under you, monitor this? Because maybe you have prepared a very spectacular guide, but then if this is not being followed, it is not going to be good, correct? That's one thing. And then the second thing, what about new universities, maybe new public university and also new private universities? Maybe they are still not ready for this. Maybe you can comment on that?
Okay, to answer you the first question, in terms of the monitoring aspect, one way of doing the monitoring is through our accreditation process, because we will go down to the sites and we will observe the OBE conduct that had been done at the universities. So in general, those programs that had undergone the accreditation process through our accreditation department basically has fulfilled the minimum expectation on the outcome-based education. Probably some of them may not have a good CQI QMS, but then again, they are moving in that direction. So we are quite happy in terms of that. But we don't have issues of basically only a very isolated case of having problem with identifying COPO mapping. We do have, but it's only a very isolated case. So therefore, I would consider that our OBE system in the country has matured. And I think CEE also had done a good job in trying to provide training to all the, all the educators in the country and worldwide. And we also have mindset. And we have some other entities, and we also have many other universities that are also doing this. And I think the blessing in disguise of COVID-19 is we will see there's a lot more of online training given for free to the university educators. And everyone is sharing their best practices. And because it can be easily, streamed to their home ground, and it is easy to get everyone to be on board. So I'm not too sure how many actually watching our presentation currently.
It's about over 500.
See,
over 500 at the moment.
You can actually now get more than 500 people to just
Yes,
listen to
correct.
this particular 1 or 2 hours. And when we even when we had our our EAC and ETAC standard webinar, we get 1,000 participants. So it was never in our experience that we get this many participation. But because of the VC facilities that we have, so there is a blessing in disguise. Okay, now for the
Okay.
second question that you asked in terms of how does the new universities or new program getting on board. So as any youngsters or any young family member, they will definitely be trained by their siblings, right? Their elder siblings. So therefore, all these young programs, they definitely have to source around who are their big brothers and their big sisters, and they are capable of benchmarking with the best university. And we also have the ranking in Malaysia that they could actually look at who has the best facilitation in terms of OBE, and they can actually get their training from these particular big brothers and big sisters. And they can also come back to EAD, because we will give maybe a yearly training to all the IHL, because our training is more focused to the panels. And if they have any panels from within their program, that should be an added advantage, because this panel are getting the privileged information from being a panel at EAD, and they know the expectation of EAD and ETAC, and they can bring it back to their university. So I would like to encourage as many as possible, those with the qualification, to come on board to become our ETAC panel and also our EAC panel.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take one more question. Okay, before we move on to the next panel. Okay, this question comes from Dr. Pei Ching O. Okay, I just read it. According to EAC 2020 manual, WP1 covers WK3, WK4, WK5, WK6, or WK8, right? Okay, in the previous slide, it was shown that WK7 is also covered under WP1. Can you please clarify whether WK7 is included? Thank you very much.
WK7 is included under WP1?
Okay, the question mentioned in the previous slide, it was shown that WK7 is also covered under WP1. Can you please clarify whether WK7 is included?
Okay, WP7, if you look at that particular slide, you don't have to bring me to that slide. WP7 is addressing PO6, PO7, and PO8. So the slide that I've shown in terms of the final exam is just looking at PO1 right up to PO8. So if you are asking any question with respect to PO8, what is PO8? PO8 is on ethics. So you need to address WK7 under PO8, because PO8 is looking at comprehension. Then again, if you're looking at PO7, which is on sustainability, you will also have to address WK7. WK7 is on comprehension, but it is not counted in as one part and parcel of WP requirement. WP requirement is looking at WK3, WK4, WK5, WK6, and WK8. If you are addressing WK7 only, then you are still not addressing WP1. So therefore, WK7 must be addressed together with WK8, probably with WK6, which is on practice, or probably on WK5, which is on design. It cannot be standalone as on WK7, because it is just comprehension.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think we have to stop now for a while.
Sure.
So we have to give way for our next presenter, Professor Dr. Khairiyah. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Siti Hawa. Okay, now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Khairiyah, our Director for Center for Engineering Education. Okay, dipersilakan.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zaki. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are going to start the presentation now. I'm basically going to focus on the how. Next. Now, the aim of my presentation is on how to prepare the open book written exams. And we will also touch on how to prepare open book exams, particularly for this online open book exams. Next. So this is the outline, the introduction and guiding principle. Next, we will look at how to translate the principle into practice. And the final tips, and we'll have Q&A again. So at the Q&A, you can still ask Prof. Siti. Next. Now, have you ever given or taken open book exams? So we're going to go to the Mentimeter. Can you please share the Mentimeter screen? So this is the code. Go to www.menti.com and the code is 50373. Now, some of you have answered this. So there's 25 so far who have participated. So we will wait for about 1 more minute. So please log on to www.menti.com and insert the code 50373. Okay, very interesting. Now we have some of you who have always given open book exams, and quite a lot of you who have never given open book exams. So I can really understand your anxiety in these times of having everything online. Okay, just 15 seconds more. Okay, great. Now, if you look at this poll, the majority has never given any open book exams, while some of you have given open book exams a few times. Some of you have always given open book exams. And on the other side, when you were a student, I think the majority of you have taken open book exams several times, a few times, yeah? Some of you have never taken open book exams, and some of you have always taken book exams. Now, when you were a student, if you have taken open book exams many times, so you will have an idea what it's like and what kind of exams are basically testing your knowledge and very applicable, and what type are just not that useful. Now, this is very important. If you have taken open book exams before, then you can remember what it felt like when you were students. But if you have never taken an open book exam before, you have to try and have empathy for the students, because although open book exam may seem to be convenient for the students, it can also be very difficult. So it depends on how we approach the exams, how we design it, and how we go through it with our students in the class. So can I have my slide please back? Okay, now next slide please. Now basically, open book exams are really good when you want to assess the function of the knowledge. If we use the language of constructive alignment, this is the functioning knowledge. We assess what the students can do with the concepts or the knowledge. We can make sure that the answers are not in the book. And of course, if you're doing this online, they cannot search for it online. So nobody can Google the answer to the exams. It can be task-based, such as you ask the students to solve a problem, make decisions, do some higher order thinking, such as do design, decision making, and so on. And when I was a student, usually we would get open book exams when the book has a lot of standards, charts, tables, physical properties, and like 1 mile equations that we were not expected to memorize. And it's usually most suitable when we can develop the questions to mimic real world scenarios. So by doing this, real world scenarios can easily be made open-ended. Now, if you plan to give take-home exams, this is actually a subset of open book exams. Take-home exams are normally longer. Yeah, it is at least 1 whole day. So if you give it today, it's due the next day. Or it can take up to 1 week. Be careful if you want to give take-home exams, because take-home exams, especially during the final exam period, you really have to know how many exams the students have, because you can easily overlap these exams. Can I have my slide back, please? Okay, I think there's a technical glitch here. Dr. Yana, can you please share my slide? Okay, now we have discussed about what the take-home exams are good for. And of course, like Prosity shared just now, when you want to design an open book exam, you have to think about the outcomes first. The outcomes, can you, next please. The outcomes would depend on what are the course learning outcomes. Now, how do we relate the course learning outcomes to the whole design? When we want to design open book exams or any assessment for that matter, we really have to understand the guiding principle. And like Prosity mentioned several times just now, we are using constructive alignment. And I'm really, really happy that the EAC is recommending that we use constructive alignment, because constructive alignment is very closely mapped to OBE, or outcome-based education, that we use for the accreditation of engineering programs or any programs under the MQA. The outcomes in constructive alignment is normally termed as the intended learning outcomes, or the ILOs. So I'm going to use this acronym after this. Yeah? ILOs are intended learning outcomes. The teaching and learning activities, the TLAs, should be decided based on what the outcomes are. And how we assess the students should also follow from the outcomes. Now, if you look at these 3 elements, it looks very, very similar to the OBE. The only difference is that constructive alignment has a constructive word in front of the alignment. Both OBE and constructive alignment has alignment. But Professor John Biggs inserted the constructive in front of the alignment because constructive alignment is based on the constructivist learning theory in education. Basically, what the constructivist learning theory says is that whatever are the verbs in the learning outcomes, it must be activated in the teaching and learning activities. That means the students should actually do whatever the verb is in their learning process. And if we have done this in our classes, it is actually quite simple to assess because we can assess them and provide feedback as they are learning and doing whatever that verb is. So if we want to use open book exams, we actually also have to tell the students that this is how we are going to assess them. And it should follow whatever teaching and learning activities that we have designed for them. Next slide, please. Dr. Yana, next slide, please. So it is actually very important because under constructive alignment, assessment actually drives learning. Now, these are the things when you want to decide the assessment approach that you want for your class. So this is in general, but I have skewed this towards open book exams. So what is the purpose of the assessment? If you want to attain the intended learning outcomes or the ILO, make sure that if it's a test, students have a chance to get feedback from it. Of course, if it's a final exam, that is totally summative, so there's no formative part. Now, what is it that we want to assess? If you're using open book exams or open book quizzes, try your best to assess the functioning knowledge. Now, there's two types of knowledge in constructive alignment. One is declarative, one is functioning. Declarative meaning you just explain it. You just explain and do not expect the students to do anything with the knowledge. Of course, the higher level outcomes would expect the students to actually do whatever it is that they learn. So this is classified under functioning knowledge. How to assess this? If you want to use open book exams, we are going to look further into it. Now, who will do the assessment? Do you assess it yourself? Or do you have a teaching assistant to help you? And is the assessment suitable for the students? So please focus on the students. If the open book exam is suitable for them, they have whatever it is that they need. If you want to use open book synchronous mode, do the students have enough data to go through the exam? Do they have strong internet connection? And so on. Okay, next please. Now we have come to the next part, how to translate the principle into action. So how can we prepare open book exams? Next. Now I have been quite fortunate because when I studied in the US and Canada, I have had a lot of open book exams. So it's always open book exams for the engineering courses. And as a lecturer, I have used open book exams most of the time. It is very rare that I use closed book exam. So you have to understand what is it you are aiming for when you use open book exams. First of all, look back at your outcomes. What is the course outcome? So you determine the ILOs and how you want to design the instruction such that it will be done in the classroom. Next slide, please, Yana. Now, in constructive alignment, Professor John Biggs has actually come up with another taxonomy, which is called the SOLO taxonomy. SOLO means structure of the observed learning outcomes. So it is not limited to the cognitive outcomes only. Now, if you want to use Bloom's, there's no problem. Okay. I would like to introduce the SOLO taxonomy to you because I find it very easy to use for making rubrics. Now, the way Professor John Biggs explained the SOLO taxonomy is like this. At different stages, when we go through something, learning something new, we all start with the first level, which is the pre-structural level where we do not know anything about a certain concept or a certain knowledge. The next stage, once we have started learning about it, we may see one aspect of the concept. Now, as we go through the concept again, we think of how it's being used, we learn again, we talk to other people, then we can reach the multi-structural level, where we see several parts of the concepts, but it's disjointed. We see it as individuals, and we don't know how to relate them so that we can apply them. Now, if we go on and learn, the next stage we will reach is the relational level. The relational level is the first level where we have entered deep learning. This is where we start to know how to apply the concept or the knowledge. So we begin to be able to relate it to what we already know, our prior knowledge, and to the other knowledge that we are learning. We see the connections between them, which allow us to apply it or analyze or do whatever it is with it. The highest level is the extended abstract. This is when we begin to see how to use the concept or the knowledge onto something new. So we begin to see how to modify them and use it as at a higher level and in new conditions. So in this solo taxonomy, you can look at your intended learning outcomes and see where it lies. If the highest level is at the relational level, we can determine this as the standard for an A. Okay, so once you have managed to determine the standard, you can use this solo taxonomy as a guide. Let's say in your class, you want the extended abstract level. So that will be an A, relational is a B, multi-structural is a C, unistructural is a D, and pre-structural is a fail. Okay, so that is just an example. So that you have in mind, when you look at your open book, open-ended questions, how to make your rubric so that you have this standard in mind and you are able to be consistent when you're doing the grading. Okay, next slide, please. Now, as part of constructive alignment, determining this standard is very important, according to Professor John Biggs. Now, by the way, if you're wondering, I managed to learn about constructive alignment from Professor John Biggs himself. This is in before 2010 when he came and he gave a 4-day workshop in Kuala Lumpur. Now, so step 1 in preparing students for open book exams, get the standard. Okay, understand what you would like your students to apply and what is the highest level. So design and plan the instruction based on the outcomes. What is that functioning knowledge that the students have to implement in class as they are learning? And on the cognitive outcomes, please discuss and think properly about the function of that verb. Do not just get stuck on the verb or on the word, because we actually have to think about the process that is involved so that we can elaborate it properly into our teaching and learning activities and how we want to assess our students, even when we are designing the questions. Next. Now, in the second step, once we have determined the teaching and learning activities based on the intended learning outcomes, we can support the students to attain the outcomes, because some outcomes like complex problem solving consist of a lot of lower level skills. Okay, the basic skills that they have to synthesize together to get this higher level outcome. So we may have to scaffold our students where necessary. We cannot just leave them there and they will take a long time to go up and actually reach the level of the outcome. Make sure we try to make a connection with the real situation and other topics previous or in other classes that they have learned, because this will really help them reach the relational level. Next. Now, in the third step, we have to provide formative assessments, and this can be even in the form of quizzes or tests. If we do it during the semester, we will have the time to provide feedback for the students on their attainment of the outcomes through the teaching and learning activities. Now, this is important. When we want to give open book exams and the students mostly have never gone through it before, please prepare them for it. When I teach my first year students who have never gone through open book exams, they have this tendency to think that they can study during the exam. And this is, of course, detrimental for their grade because there's a certain time limit and they will never be able to have the time to finish the exam. So what I do is I normally give them a quiz, and it's an open book quiz, and just leave them to it. So even though I have warned them not to study or read during the quiz, inevitably, nearly half the class will do it. And they will run out of time, which is fine because they will learn from their experience. And it's just a quiz. So it's not a high-stake assessment. So what I do is, once they have done this, I will have another quiz the next week, which is also open book, and train them on it, and sure enough, they become better at it. So then when I give an open book test, they know better that they shouldn't be reading or trying to find the answer in the book. And it is the same with the online classes that I have to do this semester. Some students, of course, try to Google the answer. So this is something that you have to be careful. Once we have done this several times, they know that they cannot Google the answer. They know that they cannot find the answer in the book. If they try to discuss with somebody else, they will also run out of time. So they stick to doing their own work. Like what Prof. Siti said just now about the integrity of the exams. Yes, we have to explain to the students, but once they have gone through this several times, let them reflect, discuss this with them, and they will go through it properly. Next. So in the final step, we prepare the students for the open book final exam and administer the final exam in open book mode. Of course, there are forms, like in UTM, there are forms we have to ask the students to fill in that they have internet available. But once you have done this open book exam several times, usually the integrity is assured. And even then, we prepare several sets. Okay, so I'm going to discuss about preparing several sets after this. But please, before we give them the final exam, you need to still brief them on what's going to happen. For example, the students in my class had been given open book tests. So it's a 2-hour test where we brief them. There's several sets, and they see that they really have to work on the test and not do something else. So in the final, it's a 3-hour exam. It's divided into 2 parts, 1.5 hours each. I told them it's very similar to your test. It's like taking 2 tests in series. Okay, so just make them understand that they have already gone through this process and they shouldn't be anxious about it. Okay, next. Now, this is an example of the 3rd year course that I'm teaching. So focus on the intended learning outcomes, and this is the outcome: ability to evaluate performance of 3 modes of feedback controllers by tuning and analyzing the closed loop responses for selecting the suitable ones. So for the teaching and learning activities, we use problem-based learning, And for the assessment task, we rely both on the formative and summative assessment. Next. So, Yana, please just press the next because there's animation. Okay, now the teaching and learning activities and the assessment task during implementation goes from right to left. During the design, the desired learning outcomes or the intended learning outcomes will go to the left. It will determine what are the assessment tasks, what are the teaching and learning activities. This is how you draw out in the design stage. But during the implementation stage, the teaching and learning activity and the assessment should support the students to get the desired learning outcomes. So if you're using open book exams, make sure your open book exams mimic the teaching and learning activities that you have used in class. It should reach the same level. Please do not test the students if the way we teach them is only at the lower level and we give them questions at the higher level. Of course, they cannot do it. Next. Next, Ina. Now, press next again. There's 4 sample problems here. Now, these are the sample problems that we give to our students. So there's a certain flow that they go through, which actually mimic the work process in industry regarding whatever it is that they learn. So we put it in a setting where they are working in a plant and this is what they have to do. Next. And to solve this real world problem, we guide them through the cooperative problem-based learning process, which if you're interested, there are other webinars where I have explained this. Next. Now, when you want to prepare the open book exam questions, now this is what I find very useful. From the intended learning outcomes and the fundamental knowledge that's associated with the outcomes, think about where it's normally used in everyday life. You know, you can think about the workplace. It doesn't even have to be the workplace, but in anything that we go through, especially everyday life that your students are familiar with. Now, we have to think about what the students are familiar with, because if they do not know a certain situation, and we have never discussed this in our class before, if they see it the first time in the open book exams, they will definitely panic and they will have a different mental picture than what we have. So that will be detrimental for them. Now, also think about situations that can lead this to open-ended questions. Next. So this is a sample test questions for my 3rd year chemical engineering course. So you can see that I have put in a scenario. Yeah. So this is the process, a flow control system, and they have to estimate the model of the flow control system so that they can do the control. So this is referring to the earlier outcomes that I have shown you just now. Next. So the previous slide. So if you see, there's like a story flowing in the test question. This is actually a similar flow to the problem that they have during their teaching and learning activity. Okay. And they have already got feedback on their performance there. So it's really fair, I think, for me to test them in this manner. Now we do prepare another set for this question. There's actually 4 sets to the same question. Next, Yana. So how can we do this? Now, if you're doing this online, we really advise that you have several different sets. Now, some people say just change the numbers. This is possible. However, for our course, if we just take random numbers, we will not be able to see if students really understand the concept and work through the problem. So what I did was, that was a flow control system question. So I changed it to a level control question. The pattern is exactly the same. The flow of the question is the same, but now it's a different control system. And the answer vary because of that. So if students were to discuss with other students, they will find that they have different questions most of the time. Okay, next. Now, this is a sample question for a quiz, and this is actually a take-home quiz that I gave to my students. So the outcome is to derive lump parameter dynamic models for analyzing the behavior of chemical process or any system. So the question is very short. If you see here, it's just a pot of water boiling on a stove. Calculate the degrees of freedom and develop a mathematical model. So very simple. So they had 1 day to do that. And it was really interesting because they were just learning how to do dynamic modeling. And they actually took 1 whole day to arrive at the right answer. This was an open book question where I allowed them also to discuss among them the whole class. By 24 hours, Alhamdulillah, they managed to get to the right answer. Now, if this is in a quiz or a test where you want to have it individual, you don't want the students to discuss, what are other settings where we can design a similar question like this? Do you have any idea? Now, something with a similar flow, I was actually thinking about this, and I have actually given this question before. Let's say you have a swimming pool in a cold place, like Cameron Highland or Genting Highland, and the swimming pool is heated. So model that swimming pool. So it's the same kind of question. So it's totally fair if you were to give it to your students, different students, to get the same assessment. Okay. So the pattern is the same. You're testing the same knowledge for the same outcomes. So it's totally fair. So next. This is a sample for first year students. So the outcome is for the students to be able to perform unit conversion, perform density and specific gravity concepts, mass, force, and weight calculations. The question is actually very simple. The concepts are very simple, but again, we put it in an open-ended type of question. What other settings can we use if we want to test something similar? Now, I have done another question like this. This is a tank on the ceiling or in the roof of a house. So the same things can be tested with that kind of system. Next. So finally, the final tips, always go back to the guiding principle, which is constructive alignment. Remember that at the design stage, how we design the outcomes, the active verb in the outcomes should dictate the teaching and learning activities and the assessment tasks. And during the implementation stage, make sure that the teaching and learning activities and the assessment tasks support the attainment of the outcomes. Next. The final tips, understand and embrace the intended learning outcomes. So really understand the fundamental concepts. Where is it used? So this is the functioning knowledge. And what is the standard that we would like the students to attain? And this should be the A that we define in our grade. Next, the teaching and the learning activity should support the learning and attainment of the intended learning outcomes. So remember the alignment, the scaffolding, because this is actually the constructivist part and is normally forgotten. If we leave this out, the impact will be on the students because they do not know how to handle the assessment that we have given them. Understand and support the learners. Please have empathy for the students. So if you have never taken an open book exam before, try to put yourself in the students' shoes. Although it may seem easy that the students have the book in front of them, it will actually consume time. And students will also tend to panic. Have a positive view of the students. In my perspective, if students want to copy, they can even copy during face-to-face exams. Of course, it's easier to copy and cheat during online exams. But I tell my students that I have a positive view of them and I trust them. And these are the things that I've done so that it will be very difficult to cheat. So nobody will cheat. So once they know that nobody will cheat and it is difficult to cheat and that I trust them, the likelihood that any cheating will happen will be very low. So also think about the students' background, interests, and motivation so that we can put this inside our teaching and learning activities and perhaps in the question. Now, for best results, start planning and designing before the semester starts so that you can inform the students this is what is going to happen, because this coming semester we're still doing online teaching and learning. So you can actually do this for the coming semester. And of course, once we have done this, like Professor Siti said, continuous assessment is the key. So it is also the same here. Do continuous improvement, and I would like to encourage all of you to reflect over what you have done and perhaps share and write about this with others. Okay, next. Next, Yana. Okay, so that's about it. Thank you very much. And now we will go to the question and answer if you have any questions for any of us. Dr. Zaki, you need to unmute.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Khairiyah. Okay, it's a very amazing, brilliant, informative session. Okay, we have here Prof. Dr. Siti Hawu as well. So we will take questions now. Okay, so okay, let's go for the first question. It's from Beng Chu. Any review on the advantage and disadvantage of the open book exam versus closed book exam? Which one can assess the attributes outcome better? Maybe who wants to answer this one?
I think both Prof. Khairiyah.
Okay, so let's have Prof. Khairiyah to answer this.
Let the CEE take it up.
Okay.
Well, so far, I've never seen any literature review comparing the two or any study comparing the two. However,
that's interesting.
Again, it's back to our intended learning outcome. Yes. Yeah. Now, there's a reason why Professor John Biggs do not just put learning outcomes. It's the intended learning outcome because it also draws upon our intention. What is our intention based on that learning outcome? What is important is that, do we think that by closing the book, the students cannot do the work when they go out to industry? Can the students refer to the book when they go out to industry? Is this the kind of knowledge that we want the students to just memorize and memorize and memorize? So that is the kind of signal that we are relaying onto the students.
Okay.
So just think about the outcomes. How is the outcomes related to the function of that knowledge? What is the function of that knowledge? Do we really want the students to memorize everything?
Yeah.
Can I just add, Dr. Zaki?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Go ahead. Okay.
One basic advantage of having an open book exam for the current situation of course, with respect to COVID, it is an alternative assessment, right? Rather than we have to prepare a multiple choice question, why don't we give them an open book exam? And for engineering, we are dealing with a lot more of complex problem solving when you are dealing with third year and fourth year students. So these are the dominant years that they need to really show the level of analysis and the level of problem solving that they can actually perform and demonstrate to their audience later on, I mean to their employers later on. And definitely when you talk about open book exam, the main disadvantage could be that it can take such a long time to answer a particular question. And I think both Karya and myself, we were trained in the States, and when we are in the third year, there are a lot of open book exams given to us. And if I may share, in many of my experiences is when it comes to open book exam, the professor is not sitting with us in the class. Because he knows you basically can't cheat in the sense that everything is in front of you. And all the books are in front of you, and what do you want to cheat? Because at the end of the day, your colleague may be, you know, pushing your chair and asking, what do you answer? You won't have time to answer, you know, his question of what you answer and how you answer, because it has a lot of variables in answering it. Because when you talk about engineering, it depends on what are the assumptions that you take. And when you take a different assumption, it will give you a different set of answers. So therefore, most of my open book exams will take like from morning, from 9 until like maybe 2 to 3 p.m. The reason I stop most of the time because nak pergi solat. We need to go for prayers, but otherwise you can't leave the room. So long that you can stay in the room, if you need be, you can stay in the room for 12 hours, then you can stay in the room for 12 hours to take the exam. So that is really the main disadvantage of having the open book exam. Now, that is on the student part, but on the lecturer's part, how do you really prepare the open book exam? And it goes back to what Prof. Karya had mentioned. What is the intended learning outcome that you want to assess? So if you are going to go overboard, then you are actually now not going back to the basis of outcome-based education. You want them to actually show you or demonstrate to you the outcome that is expected from that particular course. So basically, that is my sharing for this particular question.
Thank you, Dr. Siti Hawa. Actually, coming from engineering background, I have been a practicing engineer for roughly 6 years plus. So I can relate to what Prof. Karya and also what Dr. Siti Hawa mentioned. It's actually very good to give them open-ended questions, because when we become engineers, when they become engineers, the students become engineers, they have a lot of problems in the plant or anywhere. So they need these open-ended questions a lot. So we are actually helping them. But then, as Prof. Karya mentioned, we need to prepare earlier on. So before the semester, we need to prepare. All right, okay, we move on to the next question. Okay, it comes from Samad Edros. How about assessment strategies? Can we modify the assessment strategies? I pass to Prof. Karya first. Okay. All right.
Yes, of course. There's many types of alternative assessments, of course, not just written exams, and it's actually recommended. So you can give problems, you can give projects, you can give case studies, you can ask students to do a semester-long project and write a portfolio, you can ask them to develop artifacts, and a lot of other things. So do use these other assessment strategies, not just written exams. That is actually recommended, and it will be more authentic. Authentic meaning that it will mimic the workplace or the real world happening better than we can ever have in a written exam.
Exactly.
Okay.
I agree with that, because it will provide triangulation to the assessment, all the other assessment that you've done to ensure that the attainment that you get is an authentic attainment. That's true.
Okay, so that's good. So I hope the one who asked the question is clear about this. And then we have another question from Eunice Siu Wei Fang. If we convert the final examination to alternative assessment, do we still need to adhere to the FE hurdle requirement as per EAC manual, since the nature of the exam has changed? Okay, this I would like to direct to Prof. Dr. Siti Hawa.
Okay, I think with respect to this question, if I really understand the question, it mentioned about the CPC, which is the condition for passing courses. So condition for passing courses, if you are now moving away from the final examination era, or you are taking a different alternative assessment, or maybe you're going for a continuous assessment, nevertheless, how the assessment can be, you must address the CPC. The condition for passing courses must be addressed. So that means as when we are providing tests or any kind of form of formative assessment, it must not be at the level so low that you think that it will be good enough to be considered as the measurement chosen for the outcome attainment. So I think most of the program out there are aware that we are looking at the outcome attainment and how are you going to go through with your CQI. So whatever alternative assessment, and we've given that flexibility to the universities to proceed. So in the end of the day, for EAC, for all the engineering programs, CPC must still be adhered to.
Okay. Perhaps maybe, okay, we have another question there. Okay, thank you, Dr. Siti, for the answer just now. Okay, we have a question from Muhammad Azwan Tukia. Berapa lamakah masa yang sesuai yang perlu diberi kepada pelajar untuk menjawab soalan bagi tujuan open book exam? Let me translate this for our friends in Philippines and other, from outside Malaysia. How much time, how much long, or what's the duration of the time that is required to be given to the students who are actually doing open exam question, open book exam questions? Okay, I pass to Prof. Khaira.
Yeah.
Okay. The rule of thumb to do it is this. If you have prepared an exam question, try to do the solution and give the students 3 times the amount of time that you have taken to do the solution.
Okay, very straightforward question. Very straightforward answer. Okay, maybe Dr. Siti, you want to add on to the question just now?
Well, 3 times good. I think on average, yeah, 3 times. But if you are going for anything of more complex, then it has to be more, because it depends so much on how much time you really take you yourself as a facilitator, as a lecturer, to answer the question. Because you must always add up the normal questions that we give in the face-to-face final exam will normally be twice, right? But when we talk about open book exam, yeah, I agree, it definitely has to be more. 3 is a good number, but I think that is a good indication on how we should actually provide. And we give 3. When we give 3, then the level of questions, the level of complexity shouldn't be so much complex as what we have in the real world. So it will still simulate the activity, the engineering activity out there, but it is not to be given to that level of they may need few days before they could actually resolve a problem. So I think, very true.
Okay, that's a very good tip or information from both panels. Okay, we have another question from Dr. Nurzel Ifiana Ghazali. What is your opinion on closed book exam, and what are the documentation is expected by EAC for quality purposes? This, I believe, goes for Prof. IR Dr. Siti Hawa.
Okay, in terms of the documentation, we are looking more at how the program attain their outcome attainment. And program outcome attainment is always been mentioned again and again, because we always reflect back to the 12 POs that we have in our standard. How are they being attained, and what are the measurements that you use to attain them? We will not prescribe that it must come from the final exam. As already shared with the discussion earlier on, someone did ask about Eunice, I think did ask about whether the open book exam, what are things to be adhered to in the AC manual. I do mention about the CPC. So similarly in here, when you are using a closed book exam or open book exam, CPC will still have to be addressed. Even if you are going for any other alternative assessment, CPC will still need to be addressed under EAC documentation. And when you talk about documentation, we would just look at how you go through the process and whether all the questions that you have actually prepared for the exam or for any assessment go through your moderation or go through the level of vetting, And is there any QMS, internal QMS, that would actually monitor the quality of that particular examination question? And most importantly, it will go back to the ILO, the intended learning outcome, whether it is properly aligned to that. And it will always go back to the constructive alignment. And I agree with Karya, we are really going all out with our constructive alignment. And in fact, in our report, we will mention about it is not properly aligned and so forth. So the word constructive alignment has been a good term that we put in our reports, in our accreditation reports. Thank you.
Okay. Prof. Khaira, do you want to add something on top of that?
No, that answer was just perfect.
Okay, immaculate. Okay, that's good. Do we have any more questions here? Okay, maybe we can. Okay, those of you out there, can you please go through the Mentimeter provided there? Okay, just key in what have you gained from today's webinar so far. Okay, maybe Prof. Khaira, maybe you want to comment on this?
Yes, really. So we're very happy to see that you've gained some knowledge. You learned about solo taxonomy, the active verbs, how to design online assessment. So we really like that you really like this webinar. The level of complexity in open book assessment strategies, overview of the open book examination. So what else? A clear picture on how to prepare open book exams. Okay, that's great. And I think there shouldn't be any doubts with the presentation by Dr. Siti. Whenever people ask me about open book exams, take-home exams, they always say that, well, EAC will not allow it. EAC will not allow it. So I think the presentation from Prof. Siti today will dispel any of those.
That's great.
Yes. Yeah, Prof. Siti is the person. All right.
That's great. Yeah. I think one thing, Dr. Zaki, I need to share with you, with respect to COVID pandemic, we have issues of IT infrastructure availability to many of our students. So in our COVID-19 guiding principle, we do mention that there must be access to at least the minimum level. So when you talk about minimum level, it is now the university's integrity to ascertain what is really the minimum level, right? I think we have the case where the student from Sabah who have to sit the final exam paper.
Viviona.
Oh, yeah. What's the name?
Viviona, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Okay.
So
and she has to share that she has to actually climb up a tree in order to get the internet line. So those are the things that are issues that is pressing with our students with respect to the situation now. Are they all our students getting the internet facilities as what we wanted them to do? And if we are talking about having an open book exam, which is just writing in words, that's fine. But when you talk about they are supposed to do some kind of simulation, which will require them to use some kind of computer software, and at the same time to look some of other probably literature search that need to be done online, then it is not possible for them to really fulfill the ILO that we want them from the open book exam. Then what is our score now? Are we going to proceed with open book exam? Or are we now going to change to just a very simple multiple choice question exam now? So all of this alternative assessment that is going to be adopted by the universities must always be mentioned transparently in our SAR document, so that we know what are the problems that is faced by the universities and especially their students. Because at the end of the day, we want all the students to be able to get a fair share level of education. We can change everything to online, but at the end of the day, I think we really need to be honest here, whether our students are really getting that kind of knowledge that they should be getting throughout this COVID pandemic. And now we are going to continue our online learning until the end of the year, right? So that is another 1 semester of classes. And I really would like the universities to do some kind of a survey. Maybe CE can do a survey to see what is the reception of the students with respect to this online learning. Are they really learning as much as they think that they can during this particular online learning, TLA, or it is best for them to go on face-to-face? Yeah, I think that is something that can be considered under CEE survey.
Yeah. That we will discuss backdoor with our director, Prof. Khairiyah, okay, later on. Okay, but then I think we have about reached the end of the session. I would like to really say thank you very much. I mean, on behalf of the audiences, we want to express our gratitude. We appreciate your time. We know you are very busy. I mean, both of you, Prof. Siti Hawa as well as Prof. Dr. Khairiyah, very busy, but then you take time for this session and we really appreciate that. Okay, but then before we end the session, I would like to give several announcements. Okay, the first announcement, please, okay, the audiences, please stay tuned because we have another UTM CE webinar. Okay, this will happen next week on a Wednesday. This is conducted in Bahasa Malaysia. Okay, terokai matlamat pembangunan mampan menuju 2030. So this is talking about sustainable development at its best. We have representative from UTM itself, from Jabatan Pelajaran Negeri Johor, as well as Majlis Bandaraya Iskandar Puteri MBIP. So there are 3 panels from 3 institutions. So they will be discussing about this sustainable development. Okay, so this is going to be a fantastic program. So Dr. Siti Hawa, please also attend if you have time. Okay. Okay. The second announcement. Okay. The slides for today's presentation will be uploaded to our website, CEE website, as well as will be inserted to the description of this video somewhere maybe on Monday. Okay, because we have something, we have to do some arrangements, so we are going to upload it. So we know that a lot of you requested for the slides. Okay, we will actually upload the slides, so stay tuned. So if you actually subscribe to CE UTM CE channel, YouTube channel, you will be notified for this as well. Okay, so next one, the final announcement. Okay, if you have not subscribed to UTM CEE channel, please kindly do so. Share and like as well. Okay, so we are trying to spread all this information, useful knowledge, engineering education, OBE, ILO, constructive alignment, so sustainable development goal, and many things. Okay, so I think that's all for me. On behalf of the organizer, UTM Center for Engineering Education, thank you very much. Okay, once again to the panels, Dr. Siti and also Prof. Khairiyah, thank you very much for your time. And to the audiences, thank you. See you next week on Wednesday. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.